pointing to on each side?
You got to look at the YouTube one to see where we are.
All right, we are live.
All right, great. I'd like to call to order the June 17th meeting of the Brady Bunch. I mean, the Chagrin Falls Board of Education. Thanks for the idea, Greg. Ms. Brudno, if you would please call the order.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger.
Yes.
Mrs. Brose.
Yes, here.
Mrs. Garvey.
Here.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Here.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, if you would all join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under
God,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice
for all. Hey, Phil, can I ask one thing? Sure. I have everything's getting repeated to me 5 seconds later. Should I drop off and come back in? Like, I hear people talk and I hear it again 5 seconds later.
Yeah, I would, Greg. Hop out.
I'm gonna drop off and come back in.
I'm wondering if it was because of the connecting to audio earlier.
Okay. We have to hold business until he comes back.
Well, I can ask Jen, did I see you get a new puppy?
We did, yes.
How's that going?
It's going pretty well. She's been home a week and I'm sleeping through the night again already, so it's not been bad.
Well, he or she looks adorable.
Thank you. She is a lot of fun. She's cute.
My children are very envious.
I'm happy to have them over to play. And
okay.
Sounds like it's time for the Broses to get a dog.
All right, sorry about that. By the way, that was completely my fault. I know what I did wrong. I had the YouTube channel up. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay.
All right, next we will go on.
Now we lost Phil.
Phil, you're frozen.
It's a bad start.
It's gonna be one of those nights.
Usually the freezing isn't this long.
I know.
I feel like he lost internet.
I'll text him and see if he's gonna pop out.
All right.
I just sent something to him.
Okay.
He's coming back again.
Keeping you on your toes tonight, Mike.
This is a lot. Early on, I got a nice shirt on too.
Yeah, you're not hiding.
I think we might be losing viewers if this is the way our.
I don't think we're getting any ad revenue off of our YouTube channel.
This is not helping our programming.
This is odd.
Here he comes.
Thanks. All right, sorry about that. Okay, we'll try a different device. All right, I'm all the way down to treasurer's reports, if you guys are ready. All right, sorry.
How about the minutes? I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from 5/27 regular and special meeting.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion?
I did give two little corrections, just typos.
Yeah,
Yes.
those have been made.
Okay,
You're not the only one who made the same correction.
Okay, great.
So those have been made.
Okay. All right, Ms. Bruno, if you could please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
All right, moving on to board reports. Now we're just going to go through the board sections of board reports. Where if you have an update, please state it. If nothing is new, we can pass on. So the audit committee and board policy committee, Mrs. O'Toole.
No report for audit committee. For policy committee, just a reminder that we're having a meeting this coming Tuesday, June 23rd at 1 p.m. And currently on the agenda are the required new policies related to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That's a little hard to say, but that has to do with FMLA and sick leave. We need to talk about adoption of OTES 2.0, which needs to be adopted by September 1st. We're going to look at our interscholastic athletic policy as it relates to pay to participate. Update district rental forms to put on a clause about COVID-19, and talk about the changing policy IKF graduation requirements to allow for a PE waiver. That's what I got. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much. Next, Mrs. Garvey with Business Advisory Committee, Capital Planning, and Board Finance and Budget Committee.
No report for the Business Advisory Committee or for Capital Planning. The Board Finance and Budget Committee has a meeting scheduled for Monday, June 30th at 6 p.m. The meeting will be held via electronic means as allowed by Ohio House Bill 197, and the meeting can be viewed at our YouTube channel, I believe. The agenda includes discussion of the district's financial status and the need for a levy.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have the records and retention, and we have no report there. Moving on next, we have my board is screen is somewhat frozen, but we have a board resolution to commitment to equity and excellence in education. Do we do the motion before I read it or after I read it?
Motion should be before.
I'll move to approve the resolution of commitment to equity and excellence in education.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. So I'll read through the resolution. So obviously the board, we drafted this in response to several events taking on in society currently. So the Chagrin Falls Exempt Village School District Board of Education rejects all forms of racism and discrimination as being destructive to the district's mission, vision, values, and goals. We are committed to the success of every student and providing an educational experience empowering students to maximize their potential. We embrace our organizational responsibility to ensure that the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion are fully integrated into the culture, policies, programs, operations, and practices of the district. Our commitment includes that the district will develop and implement a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic action plan with clear and measurable goals, action steps, and accountability that aim to achieve the following guiding principles. First, to support a culture and education experience in our district that is welcoming and inclusive for all students, that will be attractive to new students and families, especially those from marginalized groups and those currently underrepresented in our student population. Next, to enforce and enhance district policies, structures, and practices to prevent racism, discrimination, and inequities. To dismantle the existing policies, practices, or culture that perpetuate structural racism or discrimination in our school district. To provide high quality, culturally relevant, and responsive curricula to all students and teachers. To facilitate equitable access to co-curricular and extracurricular activities, social services, tutoring, and enrichment opportunities. To implement hiring practices that actively seek Can you still hear me?
Yes.
You ended with C.
We could hear you the whole time, even though your screen was frozen.
I'm glad I kept.
The second to last one. We'll start back there.
That's okay. I can keep going. So to I'll repeat that one. To implement hiring practices that actively seek to expand our job applicant pool to include underrepresented groups. To engage, include, and collaborate with our families, students, communities, and stakeholders, as their active involvement is essential to our ability to enact change and achieve district goals. The board directs the superintendent and treasurer/CFO to oversee the development of this diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic action plan and present it at a Board of Education meeting with an overview that includes plans for implementation and accounting. So definitely want to thank the members of the board for crafting this this resolution. It puts forward a very good structure and guideline for our commitment to diversity and inclusion. If there's any discussion or anybody else has any comments they'd like to make.
I would just like to jump in. We have had a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee in place in the district. It was led by Lisa Shannon. She did kind of extensive work in terms of surveying our community, looking at our schools, came out with recommendations that were implemented last school year. A lot of this focused on modifications to policy, handbooks specific to bullying and harassment, and really additionally clarifying systems of communications, methods, and administrative training. Also had some training for staff that was implemented last year. And there was recommendations within that regarding employee recruitment when we do have openings in terms of attending job fairs to kind of expand our pool of candidates. It included recommendations regarding clubs promoting diversity and equity, which we have seen evolve and develop in Falls High School. And there was also recommendations regarding instructional resources and review of those resources to making sure they were inclusive and expanding the cultural. The plan was this year to roll those remaining recommendations into the strategic plan. Obviously, that process due to COVID was halted after the development of the learning profile. And as articulated in the resolution, we will pick up that work and roll in some of this into the strategic plan next year. I will most likely be representing or recommending a consultant to assist us in this area. I actually started that process of vetting possible individuals today. So just wanted to provide that update and give some context to where we've been and maybe where we're going.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
I just wanted to add, I think that as Bob has pointed out, this is ongoing work in the district, and the board anticipates that this would remain an ongoing initiative because certainly our work in this area is not close to being complete. I also think it's important to call out that this was really crafted with the idea that it is not sufficient to simply be not racist or not discriminatory. that we understand that we need to be anti-racist and anti-discriminatory, and that a lot of the work that we're going to undertake will be to seek out any issues in the district and address them.
Okay. There are no other comments. Ms. Brudno, if you would please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Yes, sorry.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move on to the superintendent's reports, and I'll turn over the meeting to Mr. Hunt, Dr. Hunt.
We need, we have the 4A Phil board recommendation.
I think we need to vote on the resolution.
You just did.
Oh, sorry.
But we do need to cover 4A, which is a board recommendation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see out my
Hey,
screen.
we need Mary Kay and Sharon to make a mistake next, so gotta be equitable.
It's your turn. My gosh. Would somebody mind reading that? I've got a big block over it right now.
I can do it.
Okay.
It's recommended that due to COVID-19, the Chagrin Falls Board of Education approve a maximum of 10 days of vacation carryover into the 2021 school year for Superintendent Dr. Robert Hunt and Treasurer / CFO Ashley Brudno. I guess I should move to approve board recommendation 4A.
And I will second it.
Okay, Mrs. Brudno, if you please take the roll.
Hang on, discussion. I just wanted to say the board really appreciates all of the extra time that our administration is putting in. We've been dealing obviously with an incredibly difficult time to anticipate what the start of school is going to look like next year. I understand both of you have put off vacations that you had planned, and this is really to acknowledge that we certainly want you to be able to take your vacations, and we appreciate you making that sacrifice on behalf of the district so that we're ready to open for school next year.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other discussion? Okay, Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay, at this point, I will turn over the meeting to Dr. Hunt for the superintendent's report.
Okay, are we seeing that okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Mike, I'm having my non-advancement issue again.
You get your mouse. Can you move your mouse from the screen? Try
Yeah,
and click. Now click. That should send it forward.
no luck.
Try your arrow keys.
No luck again.
Okay. Can you
There we
see down? There you go. Got it?
Yes, thank you. Needing one more technology issue tonight. I appreciate the board providing some time this evening to kind of review our plan as it stands today. I've asked Jen Banco and Mike Doherty to be in on the presentation tonight, as they have certainly been knee deep in the weeds with all of these conversations. Before I kind of jump into the presentation, I want to caution the board and certainly the public that may be watching this or watching it back, that this is a plan based on restrictions that were provided in draft form by the Ohio Department of Education and Ohio Health Department the last week of May. They released them in draft form to get feedback from stakeholders, and they received, I think, a lot of feedback regarding the impact this would have on teaching and learning in schools. And we have yet to have a re-release of the standards and guidelines. So we are operating The plan that we present tonight is based on the guidelines that were originally provided, which are extremely restrictive. And just to highlight a few, that would include masks on students, that would include 6 feet of social distancing, limiting transportation to 24 students on a bus. So I think, it's important to recognize that this is probably the most restrictive plan that we could open with. And what I am starting to hear the conversation shifting to a little bit more of moving from the words recommending or guidelines to suggestions in which locals will have some decisions and some control. So we're going to have to be making some of these decisions. I guess I think it's important to present this to the board to understand the parameters in which we're working under. Our community start to kind of digest some of those parameters and understand the complexity of this. And although we will schedule or share with you schedules of what things could look like, I would wager to say it will look much different by the time we open school. So I caution everyone to, not overreact based on, what we currently know. I anticipate we will have something by the end of June. At least that's the most recent timeline I've heard, and we could actually hear something from the governor tomorrow in his press conference. So before I jump in, I wanted to kind of frame that for you. The district has worked very, very hard over the last month to create a plan under these restrictions. And it started internally in central office with our team creating various options that we would or eventually hand off to building teams. We felt like it was important to let our building principals and our teaching staff focus on completing the year as they were operating in a new environment and not overwhelm them with the thought of how we possibly could return. So we created a couple of documents. One is the flexible learning plan that we shared out with our teaching and design teams at the building level after school had let out. Each of those teams vetted and worked through a plan, the various options, narrowed things down and provided feedback. That feedback was given to central office and building principals, presented it on Monday, and we've made some tweaks and changes to bring consistency from a district perspective in the current plans. So I kind of have been using this analogy because I think it really fits that, the analogy of Apollo 13. And if you're not familiar with this, it was the third lunar attempt, moon landing in the history of our program. And unfortunately, it never arrived because there was an explosion in an oxygen tank on the rocket, which forced them to figure out a way to re-enter and enter into Earth and land it safely. And if you've seen the movie, and if you haven't, I highly suggest you watch it. This took a lot of grit. It took a lot of innovation, creative thinking to be successful. And I think that's very, very much what's happening within our district in terms of our ability to re-enter safely and responsibly into the 2021 school year. So if you are a fan of the movie, one of the most famous lines is when Tom Hanks radios back to radio control and he says, "Houston, we have a problem." And I think we need to start the presentation or the conversation with understanding what the problem is. Obviously, we have the pandemic that we do not anticipate having any kind of vaccine for coming back into the school year. We will have some level of requirements, either suggestions, guidelines, or recommendations from the state health department and the Ohio Department of Education. And we need to figure out how to best create a plan that meets the needs of our students. And that plan has to be flexible and adaptive. And we'll talk about how that could play out over the next 6 to 8 months. So that is our problem. That is the work that has been the sole focus of our administrative team over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to share some of this work with you tonight. So this line is also from the Apollo 13th, and it's this idea of we're kind of figuring out how to rebuild the craft while it is in flight. So every day things seem to change with the pandemic and or the recommendations coming out of the health departments and the Ohio Department of Education. But I really believe, and we stress this, and I gave a version of this presentation to our staff, to the design teams before they started their work, it's kind of our Apollo 13 moment. We've got to be innovative. We've got to be fluid and flexible, and we got to continue to endure whatever is necessary to put the needs of our students and their learning first and foremost. So I cut out the movie clip. I'd spare you that this evening, but there's a portion of this where they realize there's a problem, and they essentially figure out that they need to get a square filter through a round hole. And in the movie, they throw all of the things on the table that they have to work with. And I think that's really reflective of the model we have. We've been operating in a fairly traditional instructional model in the global we of education for a long, long time. And overnight, we were asked to flip to a virtual learning environment. So there's a lot of complexities in terms of that transition. I would commend our staff. I would put the work that they did up against anyone. I'd also commend our parents that stepped up and supported. But I do know is we will need to continue to offer some type of virtual model come in the fall, that we need to make progress in that and make it better for our students and student learning. So this idea of we're all in the same storm but in different boats, I think if you think about the pandemic, you can look at it, how does it impact us as an organization, as an educational organization, but you can also think every family, how is this impacting them? And it's all very, very unique. So we've got this idea that the same storm is out there. We've got COVID-19 and the spread of that and the lack of it or an inability to control it. But the impact to all of us is a little different. And that creates a lot of complexity in creating a solution that kind of meets these three criteria. So we know we need to have an education model that is ready for a full return. If a vaccine is found or created and it's implemented and the numbers drop and it makes sense, we can fully return to our schedule. We need to be ready to do that. We need to be ready for a limited return in which we have some kind of restrictions in terms of number of students in the building or in certain spaces, and the technology to interact with both the students in the room and the students at home. And then we need a complete virtual return. I would tell you that, if I had any poll, it would be 50-50. I get, 2 to 3 emails on a daily basis regarding the reopening of school from parents. In fact, I responded to one right before I got on here who really believes we wholeheartedly need to return with everyone starting the fall. This morning, the conversation with somebody from said,
Not yet.
There you go, bud.
You good?
Yeah.
So I had a conversation, I'm not sure where I cut out, but I've gotten an email today before I came into the meeting from a parent who believes we need to be all in, all students, all staff, and run business as usual. This morning I had a conversation that, with someone that said we need to be completely virtual. We shouldn't put our students and parents in a position of choosing. So it's that dichotomy that we have going on right now. But the reality is we need to be able to operate all of these models potentially simultaneously. And the reality may be different buildings are in different places. So if we have an outbreak in a certain building, we may have to transition them immediately to virtual while other buildings stay open. So I want to just thank these individuals. They're part of the planning team. It gives you an idea of how many people we've tried to engage in this initial conversation about the reopening. I talked a little bit through the process, but all of these individuals had a voice, and I appreciate their time in helping us kind of solve this complex problem. I think like everyone, I've ebbed and flowed personally and professionally with COVID-19. And I found myself sometimes getting caught up in the things that, we don't know, all of the, the lack of guidance from the state level, or what the numbers are going to look like when we return, what the expectations would be. And I found myself kind of going down various rabbit holes and being pretty stressed out about it. So I think it's important that we center on what we know, what we do know. And there are some things we do know. We know that school is going to restart in August. It's an economic reality that we have to face, that the governor certainly wants us to open and is going to do everything we can to open for students. We know we need the help of our staff and our community to be understanding of the kind of the predicament that we're in. And we know we need that partnership to be very strong for us to be successful. We also know COVID-19 will still exist in our community, and we need to have the appropriate PPE in place, the appropriate protocols in place, spaces in place to best provide a safe environment for our staff and students. We know it's unlikely there'll be a vaccine, leading to all the things I've already talked about, and that the return will likely have some level of suggested social distancing, which inevitably impacts student enrollment in terms of how many students you can bring into the building at one time. And we also know that we will have new technology that will provide an opportunity to live stream from classrooms. I hope to be able to speak to this specifically at the July meeting, but we are looking at improving our technology to provide more synchronous education and opportunities where students can log in from home and be a part of the classroom. And we believe that'll be independently funded outside of the school district. So those are the things we know. Certainly, we've talked already about some of the things we don't know. We don't have the exact federal and state and local regulations. We don't know the exact social distance limitations. We have set up mock classrooms in terms of, okay, well, how many kids can we get in a room with 6 feet? How many if we had 3 feet? So we do have an idea of those figures, but when we finally get the answer, we'll have to drive through and see how our models play out with those numbers. We don't know exactly what the testing and cleaning protocols are going to be that are required. We have some information, we're purchasing, we're preparing, but we don't have the exact requirements. And we know that there's going to be student, staff, and parent concerns about a return. There'll be some people that are not comfortable returning, and I think it's in our best interest to try to be as flexible as possible in helping our staff and our parents through this situation. The other piece of this is, if you think back, it wasn't too long ago we were in regular school. So we also, what this can look like from today, June 17th to where it is in August 15th or August 20th, it could be very, very different. So here are some of the what ifs we're playing with. What if we could only have 50% of our students in school due to social distancing? What if the bus number, the number of students, that can ride a bus is reduced to 24? What if we can't use our cafeterias to serve, or we can only use them to serve a limited number of students? What if students and staff feel unsafe? And what if some of our cherished programs, the things that we know do great things for kids, we're not able to offer because of some of the restrictions? I think those are all very real possibilities as we move through the next couple of months.
Bob, can you just provide a little clarity on some examples of the cherished programs?
So we talked a little bit this morning, band, so if we can't, if the health department determines it doesn't make sense that you can kind of blow through a trumpet and it creates an unnecessary risk, then band becomes an issue. Same with choir. So those types of things. The schedules that I'll show you later in a few minutes here, stretch at the intermediate school. That program is, we just can't schedule the time in with a restricted schedule. So there are things that we know help kids and are good for kids that may be impacted by this. And I keep using the word may because, in a week this could change. So we've got this very difficult problems without knowing all of our variables. But I think the reality is we have no choice to start the conversation, start the planning, and be prepared the best that we can be to open school in the fall. So we're prepared for the possibility of different conditions at any time. We need our staff, we need our community, we need the Board of Education to serve as leaders, to all work together to come up with the best possible solution within parameters that we have to create a model that is flexible and adaptive as possible. So that gives you a little bit about kind of the parameters and the things that we're dealing with and wrestling with. We thought it appropriate that we step back before we start dealing with, schedules and who could come when, to start the planning process with our core beliefs. So these are some of the core beliefs that were developed. We certainly can add to these, but here are some of the things that we thought were very important. First and foremost, the safety of our staff and our students is of utmost concern. I copy and pasted this out of our plan, but it says the health department has approved. They have not approved. We have not submitted anything to the health department, but by the time we're ready to present a final plan to the community and implement the plan, it will be approved and run through the health department. We believe the critical partnership between school and parents is always important, but it's critical for our success in any kind of blended learning environment. Bullet 3 is something that I think our staff committed to and did a very good job of. We do not believe we should go out and purchase a canned online program and just push that out to kids. We believe keeping them connected with our teachers, with our staff, having social emotional supports in place is really important. So that was a core belief that we worked on or under. We understand in bullet 4 that this pandemic impacts families differently. There are people that have autoimmune issues at home. There's students that have autoimmune issues. So the plan has to account for those individuals and educate them equally, providing access and opportunity. And then lastly, we've really tried to stress this from the moment we were, Phil and I were standing in front of our staffs when this all happened, that there's opportunity in this crisis and that we will be better on the other side of it, because of the work we did. I was joking with someone the other day that we were stressing out about introducing 3 blended learning courses at the high school coming into this year. And now that would seem like such an easy thing to pull off. So our 3 options, here's how we have framed them. One is called brick to click. So that is you are in school and you're operating and something occurs that you need to move outside of the brick and mortar and you move into the virtual learning environment. There is bullet 2, which we call click to brick, which is essentially you are in some type of either blended or completely virtual model. Something opens up and we can bring more students into the building. So that's a second model. And then a blended model, which is a hybrid model that blends both formats. You've got students that are coming to school some days, not coming other days, and then you have a group of students that are not coming to school at all. So in the plan, you'll see as you read through that, when we release it, that those terms will be included. Obviously, the most complex challenge is creating this blended learning model where you can bring a portion of your students into the building, but due to social distancing requirements or maybe cleaning requirements, you cannot bring everybody in. So this model becomes very complicated very quickly. I would hate to ask Jen and Mike to count up the number of spreadsheets, schedules, and options that we have out there. It's got to be over 100 for sure. Where you start going down different rabbit holes and then you realize you almost start back right where you started again. So this is obviously very complex and creates complexities not only for the teachers, but our parents as well. And we have to be cognizant of the impact that these models have on our parents as we move forward. So I'm gonna talk about each model as it stands currently. And I want to reiterate that these are drafts, that these are built under the most restrictive of guidelines that we have seen. And we anticipate they will evolve and change over time. You're going to see a couple of things that are consistent through elementary and secondary. One thing that's consistent through all, this is done under a 6-foot social distancing requirement. We believe if that is the requirement, we can bring about half of our students into the school. So we can bring about 10 or 12 students into any individual classroom. So in this model, well, I should say in all the models, we split the counties for transportation purposes, and we will have an AM bus run, a midday bus run, and a PM bus run. To pull that off, that would mean we'd have to eliminate transportation at the 9 through 12 to pull that off financially. So if you're wondering how can we do that, it would be this model does not include transportation for students in grades 9 through 12. We would go to state minimums. I might as well address transportation while we're here. One of the things that we're going to do when we have a little more clarity in what the exact model will be is we're going to have a kind of a COVID-19 registration where we reach out to parents and we talk through the options with them and we ask them to commit to a couple of things. One, If you're completely virtual because that's where you need to be, we need to know that, because that obviously plays into the number of students that we would be bringing into the school. And two, will you be relying on our transportation or not? I think we will have a number of parents that if it's possible to transport their kids, are going to do that just to avoid that whole interaction on the bus. So we need to get real data, and it can't just be a survey where, we've got 50% response so we can glean that means X. We're going to need to talk to or have feedback from every parent in our district to be able to pull this off and effectively schedule. So this model at Gurnee would bring in students in Cuyahoga County in person in the morning and in Geauga County in the afternoon. As you can see, there's a focus on in-person instruction, literacy, and math while the students are in place. And that blinking that may be annoying you across the screen is just to demonstrate that the encore block would rotate in throughout the week. So students would come 5 days a week for half a day, and one of those days they would rotate through their encore. That is done obviously to provide exposure to those activities, those important activities and opportunities for our kids, and also provides us an opportunity to have grade level planning, grade level meetings, and instructional design work for teachers while a certain grade level is at encore. Special education and tier 2B students most likely would be in full day. So there would be a group of students that would be in school full day getting intervention services, kind of opposite of their classroom instruction. Mike or Jen, is there anything in Gurnee's model that I didn't touch on? And I think maybe I'll pause with each building just if the board wants to weigh in, because this gets to be a lot to take in. So if there's any specific questions on Gurnee or anything Mike or Jen you would like to add, please do.
I just want to add that while we're likely to split by county, there are going to probably be some swing streets. We don't have the exact numbers now yet, but we're also looking to make sure that we balance class sizes at the different buildings. So I don't want anyone to think that automatically they will be morning or PM. We are going to have to make some slight adjustments to certain parts of the district in order to balance.
Would you be providing lunch in this format?
One of the biggest things that we avoided was lunch. So lunch would not be provided in this format.
Okay.
Bob, you can tell from the detail of this slide that your team has done a tremendous amount of work. I know one of the things that was considered at one point was alternating days of a full day. Can you just speak to a little bit of why educationally you decided to go with this model instead?
Yeah, and I think this maybe Mike and Jen, you can jump in because you sat in more of those meetings than I did, but I think there was a real feel for staff, especially after coming off being completely virtual. Seeing kids every single day was very important. So obviously, from an instructional side for continuity, but also just the ability to talk to them, develop relationship if there's potential intervention needs. It was really important that they see, especially at the elementary through middle school, see students every single day. Jen, I don't know, or Mike, I don't know if that.
Yeah, that was the exact reason. We looked at a ton of models, but we kept coming back to the fact that, especially the younger kids, the more we could get them in face to face, the better. So seeing them every day I think K6 was really pushing for that. I want to go back to the lunch thing real quick. We wouldn't be serving lunch, but on those students that would be there full day, we would have lunch available to them. Essentially, we were looking at kind of a process where they would pick the lunch ahead of time, and then food services would deliver it to them in classrooms. But yeah, I was just coming back to that.
We also have a population of students that are on free and reduced lunch. We would still continue to provide that as well. One of the things I didn't point out in here is when you are home remote, that is when you get your science and social study, and that's done in a virtual manner. So a Gurnee Elementary student would be, potentially in school, AM, ELA, and math, and in the afternoon they would get virtually science and social studies.
With the free and reduced lunch, I imagine there's a sensitivity to you're not going to give those to the students to take home with them. there would still be some sort of delivery?
Yeah, we certainly figure that out so it wouldn't single out students. Any other questions at Gurney? I'm going to jump to the intermediate school. Probably the most dramatic change, I hope it's not traumatic, is if you look at the student arrival time. This is a flip of Gurney would do a tier, be the second tier run. They would start as normal. The intermediate and middle school would be together and have an earlier start time. That was the only way we could pull off the transportation side of this. So that is a pretty significant difference for students that are currently in grades 4 through 6 or will be next year. The model is very, very similar at the intermediate school, rotating encore, giving teachers that day to plan, rotating through half a day, getting instruction, and virtual on the other half of their day. Jen or Mike, anything specific here that I didn't point out?
Just the one thing, Bob, is that we would have dedicated teachers to do the online instruction for science and social studies. So those people would focus solely on just doing virtual teaching.
Yeah, so that the transition here moves from at Gurney, the more the model in which the students are provided content, they access and they move through it. Whereas here we'd have designated teachers teaching synchronously with students in science and social studies. So they would be, there would be a time where they have to be in front of their computer, attendance would be taken, and teacher would run them through.
Question about the start times. Did you try a model of Gurney starting at the latter time and having the intermediate and middle starting earlier? I'm sorry, middle school and intermediate school starting at the later time and having Gurney start earlier. And I asked that because I know from the survey you did that students were feeling less stressed because they were able to get a little bit more sleep. I know my child has definitely told me she was able to get a lot more sleep than she was when she was on a full high school schedule. And, younger children tend to be up earlier anyway. So maybe there was a reason why it didn't work to flip it, but I wondered if you looked at it.
I believe there is, because we had this conversation late in the game, but I'm going to have to get back to you on that, honestly. Jen or Mike, I don't know if you remember why. I don't know if it was a numbers issue from Mike Morgan or not, but I'll follow up with you, Catherine, and let you know. Okay, I'm going to jump to the middle school.
Sorry, Bob, before you do that, one more on the transportation at the intermediate school. It would be a good idea to reach out to Safe Routes and see if the crossing guards would be available for all of the, opening and ending times. And certainly I think parents might feel differently about riding the bus if they knew that crossing guards would be there to assist their child if they chose to walk. And that would also really help with any drop-off backups that we would have, encouraging parents to walk with their kids instead of driving their kids and socially distance by walking.
Yeah, we did have, I discussed through some of this with intercouncil this morning, and Safe Routes was represented there as well. But that's, certainly an important piece of this.
One of the things I wanted to point out that we kept coming back to and we tried to stay cognizant of was family situations. And one of the considerations we had was if the high school students, middle school students ended their day earlier, they are home to help with after school care for younger students. So we, so many times we came back to how is this going to impact a family? How are they going to find childcare? So that was part of our thinking, Catherine.
Jumping over to the middle school, you're going to see a shift in the model that moves more to what in education we refer to a block schedule. So you've got a large block of time. Probably the biggest difference here is there's going to be a lot more virtual instruction happening. So students expected to move through their schedule and log on. We haven't totally vetted out what that would look like. I'll throw this as an example. If I'm in school in the AM and it's first period Monday morning, I may have 10 students in my room, 10 students log online. I have planned that I'm going to give direct instruction to the entire 20 students. I'm then either going to break, students out in a Zoom group, where they can interact and work, or I'm going to release the virtual students to go do the work, and I'm going to work with the 10 in my room. So we're going to have to work through kind of the design of this and what it looks like instructionally. But it's essentially kind of larger blocks of time for our students. Mike and Jen, anything else middle school wise?
Sorry, after 3 months, I still make that mistake.
I thought it was me she was waving at again. So
I was so confused.
The remote learning component for the middle schoolers. So when they are home in the afternoon or the morning, whatever the case may be, they are still going to have a schedule for when they need to log on and interact with their teacher. The concept at the middle school with these large blocks is that the teacher is going to kind of simultaneously manage and teach to the in-person contingency of kids as well as the at-home contingency. We're not going to expect kids to be logged on for the whole 75 minutes. It would more so be a partway through that block. The teacher, after having provided instruction and setting the in-person students on task, would then flip to her virtual classroom. So we have to work through what that model looks like and provide teachers PD on that. But I just wanted to make sure you understood that when kids were at home, they were still going to have a schedule to adhere to for attending class.
And one of the reasons we did that is because, again, having a schedule was one of the things that came through in the survey very loud and clear, is that parents really wanted to know exactly when their students would be working. And we felt like students needed that too. So that was a big part of kind of putting all this together.
I have a question for the two of you. It's a little complex, but somebody mentioned to me if there are any privacy concerns with broadcasting a teacher giving a lecture where some of the students were in the class and some of the students were watching virtually, and you don't necessarily have control over who's seeing the stream of the lecture, potential to hear specific students asking questions. I don't know if that's come up, but I thought it was a complicated one. So I throw that at you guys.
Yeah, no, and actually, Catherine, that was probably the number one question I got from a special education perspective during the school closure, because, we were doing teletherapy. We were providing special education services in small groups to kids where parents could see who else was in the small group. And what we've been advised by our legal counsel is that it is not a violation of FERPA or HIPAA, that given the circumstances, she made the analogy to me in terms of if my daughter was in intervention in school, it's highly likely she's coming home and telling me who else is in her intervention class, funny or silly things that happened, the kid who got in trouble, and so forth. So we've been reassured from a legal perspective that we are okay in these situations.
I'm going to jump to the.
I knew you would have thought of that.
I'm going to jump over to the high school real quick. You're going to see a lot of similarities between the middle school and the high school in terms of organization. Part of that is driven by shared staff. We've got teachers that teach in both buildings. So there has to be some alignment there. The difference is you'll see that Wednesday.
You're still cutting out a little bit, Bob. Nope.
Any suggestions?
There you go. Now you're good.
Let's blame the tech guy. Okay. Biggest difference in the high school schedule is you see a remote day midweek. Down below, there's a description of what that is, will be, what that would look like. So the students still would be responsible for moving through kind of virtual schedule. This needs some refinement, but we looked at this as an opportunity for, maybe a science teacher needs a little more time in lab. Maybe a ceramics teacher doesn't get enough time. We can, bring in small pockets of students to work through some of that as well with our elective classes. So again, more detail, we'll kind of fill that out as we go. And we need that time for teacher planning and as well. So that is, part of the motivation behind Wednesday. This schedule would operate with a lot of synchronized education. So you've got students in the classroom while students at home are logging on and following along as they go.
Bob, the elimination of the tiger period was built into our budgeting process. Does this bring back some of those FTEs?
No, it does not.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So a given student over the course of the week would attend basically a full day's worth of classes, one full day's worth of classes over the course of a week, and the rest of them would be virtual.
That's right.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yep, they're going to see each teacher one time during the week.
Mm-hmm.
So you built in time for teacher collaboration in the high school and intermediate. Does the middle school have that? And Gurney too?
Yep,
Okay.
they do. They have their daily team time as well as built-in planning time. These schedules are they capture the student perspective, but if you looked at from the teacher perspective on their regular daily schedule, let's say, for example, they have a first period planning period. So they would have planning where the schedule shows first period.
Okay.
So they have time built into their day that would be captured in this rotation as well.
And again, big change here is transportation would not be provided 9 through 12 based on kind of current ridership. Obviously that could change with, if we do a survey and, a lot of our students that normally would ride choose not to, maybe we can add 9th grade into the transportation. So we really have to get data on that piece before we kind of finalize that decision and bring a final recommendation to the board.
Bob, I'm concerned. I mean, this is tremendous, but our teachers, our staff, I feel like was working round the clock in the fully virtual environment because that was just so new for us. And I look at this and do we have ways that we're going to support them so that they can do the planning for the programming, for the virtual part, but then also be in front of a class? I mean, I don't think any of us want it to be that staff is working literally day and night.
Yeah, I would agree. They worked extremely hard. I think a block schedule is what the high school brought out. This is modified a little bit from what they actually brought forward. But I believe that they find that having the ability to live stream will solve a lot of the issues, and they do have some more planning time here. Additionally, one of the things I will want to talk to you about when we kind of have a real clear understanding of how we're going to open is when we start school officially, whether that be a soft launch where we bring in students that we need to do benchmark testing. We provide a little more time for professional development. That may be a possibility. I was asked the question this morning that someone heard me bring up the idea that maybe we start earlier in August. I would say that was a bad idea for me. We're not going to be ready to do that. So I think if anything, I would come to the board and ask for some time on the front end if we felt like we needed additional time for our teachers to prepare for the opening of school with this type of model.
So at this point in time, what's the earliest parents should plan to possibly open?
I think the 17th, I don't have the school calendar in front of me, but I think it's like the 17th of August.
I think kids start on the 20th and staff comes back starting on the 17th. I feel like I just looked at it today.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on our agenda for tonight, so we can.
No, that's next year.
So you're saying the date on the calendar is the earliest we would open, and there would be a potential to push that back if you needed to. Is what your answer is.
Correct. And the other PD is one piece of this, but also remember we don't have air conditioning at Gurney. If we're mandated to have kids in masks, that could be a factor that we want to consider and talk about. I'm not prepared until we have a real good understanding of what the model is going to be to make that change. But definitely it will not be earlier and could be later that I recommend to start. The board would have to take action to officially change the calendar on that.
So just back to the transportation piece, I know we're not going to have enough parking spaces for everybody on the high school campus. And certainly even with the improved drop off. So, once again, I think it's an opportunity to encourage, students to walk and bike to school to save, they can social distance that way and save us the hassle of what to do with where to park.
Yeah. Okay. Any other specific questions at the high school for now? I just want to make the point here. The models are created on a perfect scenario of that we have a small percentage of students that decide to stay virtual at the opening of school and a large percentage that will agree to be in this blended model. If we have a spike in the number of people that want virtual, so if it goes to 60 or 70% wanting virtual, you can see how then we have less students that want to come in. So maybe the schedule would accommodate that we could bring all of the students in. So I think, as this plays out and the data comes in and people commit to what they want, what option they're going to choose to do in the fall, then we can, we'll have to modify our model.
Bob, can I just make sure I heard you correctly?
Yep.
So a family that doesn't feel comfortable returning could opt to just be virtual for the time being, and a family that does want to go every day, that child could go every day potentially?
No, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. If the restrictions came out and we offered this model that I just spent a lot of time, the blended model, they would fall into that model. So they would come, half days as kind of articulated depending on their building. The only full day students that we're going to bring in are students that have special education requirements and needs or intervention needs. Does that make sense? So what's really important in terms of next step is one, we started to get some feedback from our constituents this morning. Obviously, the board has an opportunity here tonight, digest this. Please provide feedback either tonight or as you kind of take this all in. It's a lot to take in and consider. I would like to, when we get those requirements from the health department, I'd like to finalize and say this is our opening model in early July, so we can kind of go through that registration process and make whatever adjustments we need to make based on the numbers. And, obviously we'll confirm things and be hopefully kind of really clear on how we're opening school by August 1st. That's my timeline, kind of as it stands today.
It may be too soon for you to answer this, but this is a question that we're getting from a lot of parents. In the event that the governor says that masks are suggested but not mandatory for the students and staff, do you have thoughts on what the district requirement or perspective would be?
I would say I have not vetted that with my administrators. So I would tell you that I don't think there's going to be any How am I doing? I don't think there's going to be any give on bus transportation with masks. So a student's going to be required to have a mask when they get on the bus. They're also going to likely have to have hand sanitizer provided when they get on the bus. So that I don't think is going to be an option. We are looking at different things that could provide separation in classrooms right now. I would say the least restrictive we would be is masks on bus, in hallways, getting to class, then when appropriately distanced apart, potentially allowing students to, bring those masks down. Don't consider that, please, as a final recommendation and decision.
Do we have 24 seats on our buses?
Yeah, we have a lot more than that.
So do we need to do some sort of plastic retrofitting in this scenario?
No, the Ohio Highway Patrol came out early and said you cannot retrofit these buses.
Okay.
So the most conservative number I've heard is 24 on a bus, with the exception of siblings. So if you have two siblings that you pick up, they can sit together and it counts as one. So I think, in all of this, we need to be supportive of each other as an entire school community, understanding that this is really a moving target, caring for each other, kind and certainly resilient as we go. I want to maybe end with, we've tried to take the approach that, there's opportunity in this and that we're reimagining what school might look like, going forward. I don't think anyone likes the half-day models or seeing kids less. But I think there is some real opportunity in improving what we do educationally that is going to pay benefits, certainly as we go forward. I will end and answer any questions that you have, but do want to reiterate the plans shared tonight are developed under the most restrictive guidelines. Have I said that yet? And that they're very likely to change. And as soon as we have kind of firm guidance from the Ohio Health Department and or the Department of Education, we'll start to firm up what this will look like and we'll bring it back to the board. So happy to answer any questions or, listen to any feedback that you have. Working on scheduling a few parent groups where I kind of do this presentation, share it out with parents, get some additional feedback and hear, their thoughts on this rollout as we go through the next couple of weeks.
So I have a question. Do you expect there to be testing of students in the fall?
I do not expect there to be testing.
So,
I'm
okay.
sorry, state testing?
No, I expected them to be COVID-19 tested.
Oh, do I expect
us to be testing students for COVID-19 and teachers?
No, I don't believe that's going to be a requirement.
This is tremendous, and you can see how much work has been done. I think we should be comfortable asking parents for support in ways that they can help us. So for instance, with the transportation, I might answer the question of, would I like transportation differently from, would I be willing to find another way for my students to get to school if transportation was limited and we needed volunteers or something. That's just one example, but I think we should be comfortable asking parents and suggesting ways that they can support us through this, because I still hear a tremendous amount of goodwill for how the Chagrin schools have handled this and the accomplishments of your team and the district staff as a whole.
Yeah, providing context in this, and I don't want to say survey, I'm kind of trying to get out there, this is almost a registration, but providing context of, people knowing that if you can and do transport your student, that may mean we were able to bring more students to school on a regular basis. Really just clearly articulating those things. I've had a few conversations about masks, that being a very, very deciding factor. And I've heard it both ways. If you make my kid wear a mask, I'm not coming. Or if you're not making kids wear masks, I'm not coming. So there are a few very divisive issues that we're going to have to make some decisions on, based on what the guidance is from the health department. And I think we'll drive students one way or the other.
Is there a way to get a feel for the families that feel like unless my kids have a fever or we're sick, my kids are coming? Because I hear that a lot. So it would be nice to know how many parents will take advantage of as much in-person education as they can get.
Yeah, we're going to actually go through the registration of people and ask them to commit to that. And remember, just because I committed to say, yeah, I'll come, whatever model, that students are in, I'm in. Well, if someone gets COVID or someone becomes, contact trace and have to be quarantined, we still need a virtual place to put those students. So virtual has to be there ready to go for our students, and it will be.
I wonder, to Sharon's point, if transportation is a major bottleneck and drives the schedule. I wonder if it might be worthwhile to get the information about transportation before the models are developed based on other input.
The problem with that is asking me if I can transport. I need to know what you're asking me. Are you asking me to transport in the morning and pick up in the afternoon? Or are you asking me to transport in the morning, midday, and the afternoon? The answer might be different. Now, we could probably ask that question in those two separate ways and get the responses, which might make sense for sure.
And I've often thought we should have some type of a waiver for families that are never going to use the bus, that they just say, we're waiving our right to get on the bus. The bus doesn't need to stop here, you know.
Yeah, we were a little more aggressive with that last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
When you talk about the intermediate school and the teachers that will be doing entirely virtual, are you considering that exists current intermediate school staff, or that would be an opportunity for teachers in the district who feel the need to stay entirely virtual to step into those roles? How much staff mixing among the buildings are you considering?
We haven't gotten to that level of, and I know some names have been floated around in conversations. The other thing that I want to do once we have a more concrete plan is, you know, we need to talk to our staff about their comfort level, their issues, and see how that might play into, you know, can we accommodate some of those with virtual learning or not?
I want to mention we had talked about some type of a pledge and excuse me, swallowed the wrong way. Families making sure that maybe they're taking temperatures and pledging not to send students to school if they're not feeling well. Same thing with staff. Is that part of something you're thinking of implementing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'll be a requirement. Okay, so I would consider this kind of round one of an ongoing conversation over the next, you know, month and a half. And as you're getting questions, feel free to, you know, funnel them my way, or if you have additional feedback, please, you know, do share that. Obviously, there's a lot of moving pieces with this. I want to thank Mike and Jen for being on tonight and all of their work. That long list of people as well that gave up their time to help us get to where we are tonight. But they just are very innovative, creative people that I think everyone is focused on doing the best we can for kids. So I appreciate all of their efforts. And that would conclude my report.
Looks like we lost Phil again, maybe. But no, thank you. That report was very thorough. We can tell that a lot of work has gone into this, and understand that how it is a moving, living, breathing document that will be changed numerous times.
Okay, so I think are we on hold until Phil gets back?
When the guidelines came out allowing us to do virtual meetings,
Yes.
we were told deliberation and conversation between board members had to halt,
Okay.
but it looks like he's in anyway.
All right. Welcome back, Phil.
Thanks.
You
Phil
missed the
did
most
talk
important part. I concluded my presentation while you were gone.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Now I'll turn the meeting over to Mrs. Brudno for the treasurer's report.
I do not have any formal reports tonight. I do have information though on the House Bill 164. Right now it's just waiting on the governor's signature. So cross your fingers. If that happens, what that does is caps a district's loss at 6%. And it's 6% of our foundation. So we lost about 30% when they first announced the cut of $534,000. They are taking a net effect, so they're taking the CARES funding into consideration. So many districts receive significant funding from the CARES Act. We got about $44,000, so that is netted. that difference, then they'll consider we can't lose more than 6%. So what that means to us, if this gets signed, is that $388,000 is going to come back to the district. So cross your fingers that that gets signed. Understand, I don't think that that changes our levy scenarios because it's only a one-time payment. All indications right now are that next year's state funding, we should still expect that to be cut at least to the level that we were cut before this relief. So our state funding should be next year, we're expecting it to be about at least cut to the level that we already have forecasted. Hopefully it's not any worse, but we don't really have the answers to that right now, but I do not think that this changes our financial situation significantly. It certainly helps and we're very appreciative of it. But I don't think that it, brings the levy conversation back or, changes the scenarios significantly. So everybody cross your fingers that that gets signed.
Is there much intel or expectation, since obviously the governor was the one who initiated the initial cuts, that he will sign this revision?
I haven't heard anything expecting it to not get signed. I think right now people are expecting it to be signed. Bob, have you heard anything else? I missed the Alliance call yesterday, so.
No, I'm hearing the same thing, that it has support with the caveat of please be cognizant of fiscal year 21 reductions will occur. So I think we just keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's relief just for this year.
Okay.
What is going to happen with that logistically, though? I received an email today that we still will need to. We have a couple options. We can return the funding. We can just kind of write it out and wait, and then it'll be fixed in our foundation funding next year. So we've got a couple options right now. Probably we will return the net effect and just go ahead and get it taken care of so that it doesn't continue over into next year. If they cut our funding again next year, and they're still taking this year's cut, our funding is going to be very low and our year-end balance would be distorted. So I plan to return the amount that is due back, less the $388 that we're expecting to get back. So we will still be cutting a check to them at the end of the year just so that our year-end balance is properly reflected.
I want to thank both of you for your work advocating with Senator Dolan and the governor. And, obviously we weren't expecting that cut. It seemed punitive to our district. So it's helpful to have very helpful to have the 6% cap this late in the fiscal year. And I really appreciate all the work you both did to draw awareness to how that impacted our district and that it was unfair to us.
Ashley, does it warrant an update to the forecast, or are you just going to make that update in October?
We're already filed for May. I don't know that it would be worth updating this year's. Certainly next year's I'll include it, and I've included it in kind of some of my own scenarios that I keep. But filing the forecast again, I don't think
doesn't make sense.
Is worth it. Mm-mm.
Okay. Would you prepare that update just for the Board Finance and Budget Committee? So we're looking at current numbers when we have our meeting next week?
Yep.
Okay. Or I guess it's a week and a half from now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I should also point out, I appreciate how much Senator Dolan took the lead in drafting something that would be acceptable at the state level and supporting our district.
Yes. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Now is the point for audience and community participation, where we welcome members of the community to participate in our online meeting. So I know I haven't received any requests for this evening. Have you, Ashley or Dr. Hunt?
I have not.
I'm not.
Okay. Okay. If somebody in the future wants to make that request, you certainly can to one of the three of us. Now we'll move on to consent agenda. I have a motion for consent agenda item 8A and 8B.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, Mary Kay, second. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Brudenell, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
All right, moving on. If I could have a motion for superintendent's recommendation 9A through 9O.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Second.
it's a tie. Okay, Mr. Hunt, Dr. Hunt, if you wouldn't mind discussing any of these.
Sure. Item A is a resignation of Sarah Wilk as an educational aide. Appreciate her service to the district. Item B is a resignation from Mark Imarino, a longtime high school guidance counselor as well, and thank him for his service to our district. Item C is a recommendation for a base salary increase for the exempt staff. This aligns with increases both the teachers union and classified staff are receiving this year. Item D is a recommendation for a stipend payment for Katie Gill to do some work with instructional coaching. Just note that this is being paid out of federal grant dollars that are allocated to improving teacher quality. So kind of earmarked for that. Item E is the approval for Steve Hasshill to participate in AP Statistics Summer Institute. Him picking up AP Stats as a result of the resignation of Emily Beal that took place a couple meetings back. Item F is a stipend payment for Catherine Moon, Heather Hertz, and Sarah DeTarco for curriculum development and pacing. Please note that's PTO grant funds that are paying that. Item G is Todd Toombs. He annually helps the district by assisting students who need credit recovery to stay on track for graduation. Item H is summer extended school year services recommendation. Item I is also related to extended school year services for special education students, as well as J. Item A is a recommendation for the calendar for the 21-22 school year. Item L is approval of school fees, or a recommendation to approve school fees for the 2021 school year. Biggest thing to note there is we're not pushing forward kindergarten full day tuition at this point. That'll be something, if things change, we would prorate as discussed at a prior meeting. Item A is lunch fees. Again, we're not sure what lunch will look like, but we're going to do this annual approval just to have it taken care of. Item N is to approve a maximum carryover days for administrative and exempt employees due to the COVID-19. And item O is a recommendation for to approve a resolution for retroactive action for benefits associated with 3 employees in the district.
Ashley, this is by no means urgent, but when you get a chance, would it be possible to have an update on grants the district has received the last levy from outside of our support organizations, and just the total dollar, and then calling out some of the larger ones and what they went to? It's always helpful to communicate to the community that we are constantly seeking additional funding sources.
Yes, we just started this year. I created a special cost center within the local grants fund for each of our support organizations, so it's a little bit easier to track. But because that was new this year, I don't know that every single dollar that came in got recorded in there, because I think, you know, if a teacher or an administrator, you know, it's kind of a change for them. So if they fill out their receipt forms when they get money, they may have put it through a principal's fund or something like that. So I can't guarantee
for the support
capture every dollar.
So for the support organizations, that's the total dollar. We kind of know the total dollar amounts anyway, but that's helpful. But I'm more thinking, I am out of the loop on some of the federal grants that are on tonight's, that recommendations. And so it would just be helpful to be more updated on recent things that we've received.
Those are easy because that's just I have to fill out forms for them all the time. So yeah, I can certainly get you those numbers. I know that we do at the beginning of every year, we are required to do a presentation on some of the maybe just the special ed. Jen, help me if I'm saying something that's incorrect here. But I know that IDEA requires a report to the board every year. So you should have all that information at some point. And yeah, I'll definitely give you the totals on the federals. That's easy.
Thank you.
Just wanted to call out that similar to Bob and Ashley under the board recommendation that N is allowing vacation days to roll over one time for our staff who clearly, our other administration and central office staff who clearly put a lot of time in this transitioning and the work you just presented, Bob, with regard to school reopening. So recognizing that they weren't able to take vacation really for the benefit of the school district and to help us get ready to open. And we certainly want them to be able to take that vacation next year.
Yeah, agreed. You and your entire staff have been either at mission control or else in the capsule. So for several months. Any other discussion? All right. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger.
Yes.
Mrs. Brose.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
And I do want to be clear, I make light of it, Bob, but I do greatly appreciate all the work that you and Ashley and all of your staffs have put in. So.
No, we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, we have, can I have a motion for treasurer's recommendations 10A through 10H?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Quick on it this time, Greg. All right, Ms. Brudno, you'd like to walk us through these?
Okay. Item A is the financial reports for the month of May. There are a few things on here that I want to point out, a few things that are a little bit out of the ordinary. On the general fund summary reports, you're going to see a couple negative numbers in the revenue. One of those, the first one on line 1.035 for the unrestricted grants, that's the negative for the money that the state is taking back. And then the negative on the 1.06, that's investment revenue, and I'm going to cover that in a minute when we get to that report. And that it's a correcting entry. So those negative numbers there are correct. Moving to the general fund variance report, typically I have one or two tick marks here with explanations. This was one of those months where just everything was out of the ordinary. So there are 6 explanations there. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. But if you had a chance to go through this and you still don't understand something that I've explained there in those tick marks, let me know. Just some of it's timing issues. Again, the 2 negative items that I just explained. And expenditures obviously are down. And I think we've covered that several times over the last couple months about the measures that we've taken to reduce expenditures. And some of our expenditures have been down just as a result of COVID. So more detailed explanations on there if you would like to read them.
That is a great way to do those notations. I appreciate that on the variances. Saves us from asking questions and it memorializes it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, because if I go back 3 months from now, if I go back and look at this and I'm thinking, why was that so different? So it's kind of, for my own uses as well. So moving on to the general fund revenue report. Again, that negative number there on the state foundation is them taking the money back. They actually took the 34,000 as a net number. We didn't find out about that reduction until after the first foundation payment for the month of May had already been made. So they only had 3 foundation payments to take it out of, the second May and then June number 1 and June number 2. So the reduction was actually over $100,000, but the net effect there is that negative 34. That is posted, but you'll see it on the bank reconciliation. I carried the item. I didn't want to send a partial check back to them now and then send another one in June. So we're carrying it on the reconciliation right now. It's posted in our system properly. They have not gotten their money back yet. They will after we've posted June, the final payment for June. We will do just one check to them. And then that'll be easier, for us to see a total as well. I didn't want two separate numbers out there. So in 1.05 there, you see the negative $109,000 on the interest investment income. That's the result of what's been done in the past with our investments is they've been carried at market value rather than at cost. School districts really our investments are supposed to be carried at cost, and we book the interest when an investment matures and when we actually receive that revenue. That has not been done. So every month when the market value changes, we've been booking that as interest, either positive. Sometimes it's a little bit negative, but we've been booking that as interest. And it's not really interest revenue until we get the revenue. So it's unearned. We haven't earned it until that investment matures. So with this month, when we switched everything from the Fifth Third account over to the Red Tree account, I thought this was the perfect time to kind of fix it and make it right and do things properly. It's really just an entry. It's not, any difference in money that we're receiving. It's not, we didn't lose $100,000 or anything here. It's just an entry, but it is booking it properly now. So
that is surprising. That's a very cruel accounting thing to do. I can't believe that our fund accounting is done that way. That's interesting.
Yeah. And then that other little negative. Go ahead.
It's very encouraging to hear you tightening things up and moving things to a more appropriate methodology. Thank you for all of that work.
Of course. The small negative there on the facility rental, we had some rental fees that we had collected deposits. I don't know if it was deposits or if we'd already collected the rental fees for facilities rental. And as a result of COVID-19, those events got canceled and those are refunds. Moving to the expenditure report, I don't believe that there's anything significant to report. Expenditures are down. If you look at that graph there, our May numbers are much lower than last year's May numbers. I think we've kind of beat that into the ground there on reasoning behind that. The financial summary report of all of the funds, the Rotary fund there, that 014 fund, most of that is our performing arts program through Excel Tech. So the way that is handled is we run the program, we make all the expenditures, and then at the end of the year, we invoice the districts from where all of the students, their home district is. We do get a portion from all of those districts through the foundation funding. So at the end of the year, we do a calculation, we do a true up, and we invoice those other districts. So those invoices have gone out. They did not go out last year. Part of that was the transition. I will take responsibility because when I came in on June 3rd last year, I just wasn't even aware that it needed to be done. So this year we are collecting for 2 years worth of expenditures. So, and those have all gone out, and those are expenditures that those treasurers are aware of. So I don't think there's anything shocking to them, and those dollars are expected to be received. The other negative is the Idea B fund. Again, all of those grant funds are on a reimbursement basis. So we make the expenditures, then we request the funds from the feds. We did receive a very large payment this month of Idea B and some of that Title II funding. And then the others I will request once everything is finalized. I'll send a final request to the state, and those will all be reimbursed. And then on the bank reconciliation, nothing significant except for that adjustment for the state funding. just be aware that I'm carrying that. That money did not go back yet. It will at the end of this month. And then on the investment report, you can see that adjustment that I made for the change in the reporting of the investments. So, are there any questions on any of those before I move on?
Okay, so then on that page 9, so then that interest posted this month, that is a cash basis then.
Where are you looking?
It's just the column where you explain the interest adjustment and everything.
Right. So all of those accounts, the first few, those are bank accounts, and those are, that's interest that we actually received.
Yeah.
And then there's one investment that we had that matured. That's at $3,900 there. That was an actual investment that matured. So that we received. And then this is the correcting entry to fix it all.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a much more detailed spreadsheet behind this. If you're interested, I can give it to you. It was not fun, but we got it all sorted out now.
Thank you for that. I assume the document could be accessed by someone who is looking at our agenda if they wanted to look at the financial report. I don't know how difficult it would be with Zoom, but it would be great if you could project the numbers as well, or maybe Mike can do that while you're walking through them. I know it's hard for an audience member to follow along when they can't see the actual document or what page you're on.
I can try that next month. Maybe we'll be in person next month.
I did hear from another board president that they had their first in-person meeting and it was not really a solution. They were social distance, they wore masks. It was actually more difficult to communicate in her opinion than doing it this way. So we'll have to have that discussion about what's actually working best for us.
Any other questions on item A? Okay.
Is there any end date on the legislation to allow for virtual meetings?
I believe when it was originally passed, it's through this calendar year. I could be wrong, but for some reason, I feel like it expires.
I believe you're correct. Yeah, it's December.
Okay, so we could keep going if we wanted to, but we don't have to. Okay.
Okay, item B is the permanent appropriations for next fiscal year. It's fiscal year 21. In the past, last year was the first year that I believe a full year of permanent appropriations was done. We do have the option. Schools are allowed to do a temporary appropriation. I believe you're supposed to appropriate for 3 months of activity. I don't know that serves a whole lot of purpose when we can amend our appropriations at any time if we need to. So these numbers are not locking us into anything right now. If we need to amend these, we can certainly do that throughout the year. Item C is the final appropriations for this fiscal year. There was a typo in the 019 local grants fund when I first put this up there. I noticed it this morning. It did say 100,000. That final is 300,000. So if anybody out there printed this beforehand, before I made the change this morning, it is different. So just wanted to point that out.
Ashley, can I just clarify the change in the procedure then? So the permanent appropriations would become final appropriations next at the end of the fiscal year for us to once again, or unless we change them, these are
they wouldn't automatically become a final. We will always do a final in June. I suppose if we didn't do it, then they would be, or the original appropriations plus any amendments we made throughout the year. The county keeps a tally. So I suppose they would be, but we would always go through at the end of the year in June. We do an analysis and make sure that our appropriations don't exceed our estimated resources. Our expenditures plus encumbrances don't exceed our appropriations. There are several different Ohio compliance requirements that we have to analyze. So we do that at the end of every June. If we didn't, I'm certain we would end up with some sort of citation somewhere. So I can't imagine a case where you wouldn't do a final appropriation measure.
Okay, so your intention would be to bring it back to the board for just like this one is done. We'd see them.
Yeah,
again.
this will be the official appropriations
Mhm.
starting July 1.
Right.
If during the year somebody receives more money in a fund or something happens, we can amend, and we do. Typically clubs have, they'll change throughout the year because they brought money in on an activity and now they want to appropriate it. Grants sometimes cause us to change the appropriations, and then at the end of June next year, we will go through this whole process again. So. Item D is a then and now certificate. This was for $6,333.46. It was for vocational education tuition to Willoughby Eastlake School District. I believe that just, excuse me. I believe that one was just one that slipped through the cracks. They did not have a purchase order out there until they received the invoice. I don't believe they were aware of what the total amount was going to be. Item E is a fund-to-fund transfer. This is $46,297 from the general fund to the permanent improvement fund. This is to round us up to the $2 million commitment that has been made. We transferred exactly 1.5 earlier in the year. We estimated the amount of taxes that were going to come in on that fund. We weren't aware exactly what happens until it happens in the taxes. So this is the difference, and we need to transfer another $46,000 to get us to the $2 million. And item F is fund-to-fund advances. These are transactions that are going to go from the general fund to these individual funds that are listed. Advances in definition are that they're going to go back. So this is not a permanent transfer. It will transfer now. Some of these are those federal funds that are negative at the end of the year. We don't want to end the year with a fund in the red. We can get cited for that. So this is just to kind of clean those up. And then once we start the fiscal year into next year, we will return those advances back to the general fund. Item G is our insurance through All Things Insurance with Liberty Mutual. If you're looking and comparing cost, it did go up. The cost went up from last year. I did make a few calls because when I first saw it, I was a little concerned. I called a few other districts, and it's consistent. There were, with everything that happened this year, insurance is just going up. So, and then item.
Sorry, I have a question about the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, we had talked about investigating directors and officers insurance for the whole board. I assume that this would fall into this policy if we make that change. I just wanted to bring that back up on your list of follow-up items.
Well, actually, I happened to have a conversation with Mike Chess, one of our agents, about this today. Mm-hmm. And he kind of stepped me through, if you don't mind, actually.
I don't.
He kind of stepped me through a few of the things, and I asked him, we went over specifically D&O, and actually, D&O insurance is included in our general liability as well as the umbrella. So, the total amount is $5 million. So that would include everybody on any board member, and then anybody, in an administrative or leadership position within the school district.
Yeah, there are, there's sort of a move right now for, I'm bonded, and I believe, Bob, you probably have a bond. There's a movement right now to kind of move away from those and get those on an insurance policy. That is not included in here. We're separately bonded. And but there are some districts that are moving in that direction.
And the board president is separately bonded too, right?
I believe so. That's a position bond. Mine is specific to my name.
Mm.
It's not. It doesn't cover, if another treasurer were to come in, they would have to transfer that bond and get it specific to them. Mine is personal, but the board president is a position bond.
So, Ashley, are you saying that moving away from the bonds to the overall insurance is the direction that things are going? And
it really is a preference. I don't know that it makes a difference. I don't think it's different. I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in cost. And I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in coverage, to be honest with you.
You might.
I could do a little more research on it.
Yeah, you might want to ask Mike about that. I mean, at least the way that he described to me, you're both covered under the D&O insurance policy currently.
I don't, yeah, for some things, but I think there are some things that does not cover.
Okay.
That you want your treasurer bonded.
So is it fair to ask for a board report at some point to summarize the coverage for the board and the administration? And if there's any changes, we can enact those.
Yeah, you want to know what's covered under our policy?
Right, and I think we specifically would like to have the board covered. So if that isn't the case, to move in that direction, and if it is the case, for us to understand what that includes.
The board covered for what?
Any liability. If somebody were to sue us personally, I certainly wouldn't want my house to be at stake for.
Yeah, I don't know that is even possible, but I can find out.
Okay, I think that's what we, feel it's appropriate. Most boards would have coverage like that. You don't want your service on a board to put your family financials at potential risk. So.
Yeah,
Right.
I believe you're covered for errors and omissions, but I don't know that liability is a possibility, but we can find out.
I think it's in there. I mean, the D&O insurance policy is, as I know it, the boards are usually covered under, we talked specifically about how that was included in our general liability and our umbrella policy. I think we're covered, but yeah, actually it'd be good for you to run through that with them as well.
Yeah, maybe we should have them come in and present to the entire board on that.
Sure. And just another quick item. So I know that we specifically talked about it. That was my first question, was about D&O insurance. Second question was, anything related to COVID-19 and pandemic. And he said that usually there is a pandemic waiver or exclusion on the insurance policies. And he said it is not in this insurance policy. They specifically took it out. So, implicitly, any kind of liability pandemic coverage would be included in there as well. And of course, another element of that is workers' comp, which doesn't have anything to do with the general liability policy. But, I know this from personal as well, is that currently in the state of Ohio, if there is a claim about COVID-19, it does not apply to workers' comp. It's deemed that you can't determine that somebody was, exposed to COVID-19 during their work period. They very well may have done it on their personal period, so you can't apply it to workers' comp, except that the states of California and then now it was like Texas or New York, California and then Illinois, they have made it a workers' comp claimable, instant. Right. So that just happened. So that's not a good trend in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how they can even
determine that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because workers' compensation has to be, the injury has to be obtained through your normal regular duties. So
I don't know, just something for us to be aware of and keep an eye on.
Yeah.
So that's all I had with the insurance.
And then item H is an agreement for our HR kiosk. This is where our employees can go out online and they can access their payroll information. They can change their address. They can print off copies of W-2s, things like that. This is not an agreement that costs us anything. It's just information and data sharing. LGCA operates this for us. They just have to have this agreement signed before they can operate that. That's all I have.
Gotcha.
We didn't have that previously at the kiosk.
I'm sorry?
The kiosk, we didn't have that previously for employees. Is that something new that you're bringing to the role?
No, we've always had it.
Okay.
I don't know that the agreement has been brought to you before. Bob and I have discussed, and we've kind of changed sort of the way we've done things as far as agreements and contracts, and we're trying to bring everything. They sent it to me electronically and wanted me to just go ahead and sign it. And I said, you got to wait until my next board meeting. Their response initially was, well, this isn't money. It doesn't require board approval. It may not require it, but just to kind of be consistent with what we've been doing, I'm just bringing it to you for approval.
Again, thank you for tightening things up. That's great.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. At this point, any other business?
Well, it's not really other business, but Bob, can you give us any information that you have at this time on the plans for Excel Tech? I didn't think about this during your presentation. Have we not gone to that level yet, or is
Yeah,
there?
we had a superintendent meeting with Excel Tech superintendents late last week, and all programs are anticipated to run. They have more space actually than the normal traditional classroom. I did ask for our Performing Arts Academy to put a plan together before I kind of committed us to that. So they're going to do that, and I'll review that, and we'll make those decisions. So those programs are slated to run, and I don't anticipate it being an issue.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Seeing none. So our next meeting will be July 8th on this YouTube channel. And no executive session. If I could have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right. Ms. Brudno, if you please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.